As we continue our discussion on the concept of classes in Java programming, one term that keeps coming up is the term static. So I'd like to take a minute to talk about the static modifier. We can have static variables and we can have static methods. I think I have a little example of how to demonstrate each one. So let's talk about static variables for a minute. I'm taking a program that you already know fairly well, and that is, let's see, I have the die class. I have a minimum of 4 faces. I have some things commented out. You can ignore it. I have 2 fields, number of faces and face value. The die constructor initializes my instance variables, or I can have another constructor where I send it the number of faces, or I have a method where I can roll and randomly picks a number, 1 to the number of faces, and then returns the number. And if I want to find out what that face value just was, I have another method. We have a program here called pair of dice. Now this is an assignment you had worked on. In pair of dice, let's see, we instantiate 2 items from the die class, 2 objects. Oh, that's right, it's using the die class. Got it. So I'm instantiating 2 objects of the die class and then 3 instance variables here. Let's see, when I instantiate a pair of dice, it creates 2 dice, so there's a class using a class. Sets the value of 1, value 2 equal to 1, and then adds value 1 and 2 together and makes a total. Okay. And so I can roll a pair of dice, which means I roll die 1, then I roll die 2, then I add together what I got, and then return back the total. I have a modify, I have a method here, a get method here, which will get the total for me. I have another accessor or get method which will get the die, the value on the die 1 and the value on die 2. Okay. And the last thing is boxcars. This is very quick because I know you know this program already. Boxcars has a main method. I'm going to, final, this isn't going to change. It's an integer and rolls is going to be 1,000. The target's going to be 12. Integer, let's see, variables total and count. Count is going to be equal to 0. First thing we do is instantiate a pair of dice, apparently called dice. We are going to 1 to number of rolls. Oh, number of rolls was 1,000. So 1 to 1,000. We are going to roll the dice and see if we hit the target. And if we hit the target, we're going to add the count. Let's see. So at the end of this, we're going to report back the number of rolls and the number of boxcars. Oh, boxcars, right, a 6 and a 6. So when I get a 6 on one die, a 6 on the other, the target, the total will be 12, and that's how many boxcars I got. Okay, we're just going to run this quick to make sure this is all working well. Ooh, I just rolled the dice 1,000 times, and apparently I got 29 boxcars. Now, I'm going to create a very contrived idea here. Suppose I'm intensely interested in how many times the number 3 came up. But I don't want to know how many times the number 3 came up on die 1. I don't want to know how many times the number 3 came up on die 2. I want to know if it came up on one die, if it came up on the other die, if they came up 2 3s. I want them all counted individually. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable, a static variable. In other words, it does not belong to any one object. It belongs to all the objects. It's going to be an integer, and I'm going to call it, again, cleverly, 3s. It's private. I don't want anybody but the objects to see it. Well, can the objects see this? We'll talk more. So this is going to be a static modifier I put on this variable. Let's see, when do I want to, every time I roll the die, I want to know if the face value is 3. Now notice I could be rolling die 1 or die 2. If the face value is a 3, I want to count how many 3s I get. Okay, so threes is going to keep track of how many threes I get. We'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see. All right, that's it. So I have a static variable called threes. It belongs to all the objects. Compile this. Is everything okay? Good. Now I'm going to go to my main method again. And I have a line here that I'd like you to look at close. System out print line. Fine. The number of threes. So it's going to tell me 1,000 rolls. It's going to tell me how many boxcars. But then it's going to tell me how many threes I rolled. And notice what I have here. I instantiated an object from the die class. I'm going to call it T, whatever. And I'm going to, it just has to be an object instantiated from the die class. Because that means this die, T, has access to my static variable threes. I just want to know, at the end of this, I'm just using T to get to this one static variable. Could you tell me how many threes were rolled? Let's see, compile this. Is this all right? 3 has private access in die. Oh, you know what? I made that private. Excuse me. How about if I leave that off of there for just a minute? Let me compile that. Good. Let me compile that. Nice. Okay. Now let's try that again. So this is going to tell me how many threes there are by using this object T. All right, let's take a look at this thing now. I have rolled the dice 1,000 times. I got 19. 19 is all boxcars. But the number 3 came up 330 times. And that's the concept of static. It didn't come up 330 times on die 1. It didn't come up 330 times on die 2. Every time a 3 came up on any object I made from the die class, the variable, the static variable, threes, was increased by 1. So 330 of them. I'm just curious about something. I'm going to roll that again. 1,000 times 35. That's a little more reason. I don't know why. That seems like it should have been higher last time. But the number of threes this time is 344. So threes is a static variable because it belongs to every one of the objects I instantiated. Okay. Let's talk about a static variable then, or a class variable, is shared among all the objects of a class. Changing its value in one object changes it for all the others, such as private static int threes. Now, let's take a look at another idea. Static methods, or class methods, they can be called through the class name. In other words, we don't have to instantiate an object to use a static method. Here's the one I'm going to use. Let me show you. So let's keep that threes. I'm going to add a method to this though. And I'm going to add a method to my die class. It's going to be threes, get threes. I just want it to return the number of threes. At any moment, I just want to know how many threes have been rolled. How many threes have you counted using this line right here? How many times does the number 3 come up every time I roll the dice? Okay, this is all set. Now, this one. I don't want to instantiate an object this time. Get it? Static method. I don't need an object for this. I am going to lose this line, and I'm going to put this one in it instead. See what this does. Number of threes. Yeah, I just did that. Number of threes. But this time, I'm calling the class. The name of the class is die. I don't have to instantiate an object to use this method because it's a static method. I'm going to call on the method get threes, and that's going to call on the static variable or class variable get threes, or threes rather, and get threes is going to return the value of that variable. Let me see if I did this right. So if I roll this now, 1,000, let's see, 25 more boxcars, and there were 319 threes rolled. But you notice this time I didn't instantiate any object to get that. I'm just calling on the method. There actually is one method that you have used many times that illustrates this idea well. That is, the best known static method is the main method. You've never had to create an object to call the main method. The main method's a static method. It's called by the Java runtime, and it starts the application. Here endeth the lesson.